When most pre-meds think about clinical experience, they immediately jump to hospital volunteering, scribing, EMTing, or being a medical assistant. Today, most of these are extremely hard to get into. And even if you do, they are still generic and mediocre. The cherry on top for all of this is that some of these require thousands of dollars and months of training. If you want to be a doctor, clinical experience, shadowing, research, and community service. I'll show you the data proving medical schools care, share with you the worst mistakes that pre-meds make with these extracurriculars, and close out with strong examples from real medical school applications. Number 1. Clinical experience, what most pre-meds do and why it's bad. All right, so this is data from the AAMC, specifically the MSAR, or the Medical School Admissions Requirements. One fantastic thing you can do is see data on every single medical school in the nation. I pulled up 3 of my favorite ones: UCLA, Northwestern, and the good old Harvard University. When you get to this page on the MSAR, you can pull up these reports that look at pre-medical experiences of their first year class. Here we'll look at the importance of clinical experience. You can see here they have 2 blocks: medical or clinical community service, that is a volunteering opportunity, or medical or clinical paid employment. And you can see over the years from 2019 on the left in the blue to 2022 on the orange and the red, on the right, that you have a pretty constant level of clinical experience volunteering opportunities, kind of in that 86 to 96% range, which suggests that every single pre-med, pretty much all of them, have some sort of clinical experience volunteering position. And if you are of the 14% that maybe don't have a volunteering position, looking at the data, you can see that 57% have some sort of medical or clinical paid employment. What this suggests to me is that most pre-meds applying to a school like UCLA have some sort of clinical experience as a volunteer or clinical experience as a job, almost more than half of them actually. And these numbers have been consistent over the last 4 years. So that data suggests that it's important to UCLA. What about other institutions like Northwestern? You'll see this is even more consistent, 82% all the way to 86%, with a couple of years in the 90s and high 80s of volunteer clinical experiences. And then again, more jobs to fill that gap of clinical experience. In case you didn't do volunteering, people did clinical paid employment as well. And what about the good old Harvard? 93%, kind of fluctuating in this 85% to 95% range, as well as that 30 to 40% range for paid employment. All this is showing you again is that clinical experiences are extremely important to the top medical schools and really to all medical schools. And that should make a ton of sense as you are all applying to become physicians. What we recommend instead is to understand what clinical experiences would be perfect for you. And we have a couple of criteria that we found that are common to all excellent clinical experiences. 1, you want to make sure that you're involved with patient care and in some way, shape, or form can get to know the people that you're serving. The stories that you get from clinical experiences are king on the written application. We want to make sure that we can convince medical schools that we understand what being a patient, being a doctor, being a nurse, being a medical assistant is like. And the only way we can do that are with 4K, highly detailed stories that demonstrate you really understand what it's like to be in a healthcare setting. Number 2, you want to make sure that your clinical experience offers room to grow. Whether it's starting as a volunteer and then moving your way up to head volunteer, or starting as a health coach, helping patients lose weight individually, but then moving up to director of health coaching, where you're helping other undergraduate coaches, training them to be better versions of themselves so they can support their patients even better. This ensures that your clinical experience doesn't get stagnant and so repetitive, and that there's some other level you can always grow into. Number 3, and this is arguably the most important criteria, that the impact that you make is consistent and not one-off. Too many clinical experiences happen too infrequently, once a year, maybe once every 6 months. You want to join a clinical experience where you can put in hours, learn more about patients, support real people every single month, every single 2 weeks, so that you can rack up those hours, rack up those stories, and continue to make an impact in your local community. Even the most fancy, advanced clinical experience doesn't really mean much if really you spent 1 hour on a random Sunday over your last 3 years as a pre-med. This is a real clinical experience for a medical student now at the University of California, Irvine School of Medicine. And I just want to appreciate the stories that he's able to tell through this clinical experience. I want to draw your eye to a couple of things here. We have this young woman who was rushed in after developing weakness in her left hand. We have this young man who woke up with right-sided weakness and a history of Sturge-Weber. We have a senior citizen grandpa who dropped his morning coffee and had trouble speaking to his wife. We have another grandparent who's visiting a loved one who suddenly fell unconscious on his way to the airport. The reason I want to bring attention to these is that medicine is a profession that inherently serves real people with real families, real stories, and real hopes and dreams. The entire point of medicine is to help people have the level of health that they need to go and chase their greatest, wildest dreams. And I appreciate the level of detail and the storytelling that is done in this clinical experience, particularly because it shows me that this pre-med was heavily involved with these patients' care, even if it was just watching and understanding and learning their story from a distance. Of course, he's not the person taking the history, interpreting the MRI, pushing the medications, but he is there in that setting, understanding the severity of the situation, understanding that healthcare context, and just being a part of real healthcare in the hospital. Okay, so we're back here with the data with UCLA, Northwestern, and Harvard, respectively. This time not focusing on clinical experiences, but more so on physician shadowing. So you can see here over the years, it's been consistent in that 80 to 87% range for UCLA, meaning that 4 out of every 5 pre-meds who end up getting into UCLA have some sort of physician shadowing experience. We can do the same now looking at Northwestern, seeing a consistently stable trend here. 79 to 88 to 90% of their first year class, again, have some sort of shadowing, insinuating that it is an important thing for Northwestern medical students and their admissions committees. And now we're looking at Harvard. They've always been really high in the 88s to even the 92%. Essentially every single student who is applying and getting into Harvard have some sort of shadowing. If I were you and I wanted to maximize my chances, I'd rather be a part of the 92% than the 8% who got into Harvard but maybe didn't have some physician shadowing. That seems like a little bit harder of a camp to be in. Most pre-meds have 1 or 2 sparse experiences in the same specialty or in the same context. There are no clear details on what was actually learned during the experience, and it's very clear they just signed up just to check the box. For shadowing, we recommend 3 to 5 different specialties in different contexts. What that means is that you'll be in different settings of healthcare. Inpatient inside of a hospital, outpatient in a clinic, hospice in a facility or at home, skilled nursing facilities, home infusion centers, and even home visits was another shadowing opportunity that I had. You also want to focus on different patient populations. What does medicine look like when you're working with wealthy, health literate populations versus when you're working with maybe English as a second language, immigrants, lower socioeconomic status populations? What do doctors do differently in each of those settings? Now we'll look here at a real medical school application describing shadowing with Dr. Yashar, who's a neurosurgeon, and some stroke team neurologists. I just want to point your attention to the fact that, again, we have 1 or 2, in this case, 2 different specialties in 2 different contexts, and it's not really clear, nor are there any details that were provided that share really specific learnings from these shadowing experiences. It really feels like this student just went to these clinics just to check the box of shadowing and say, I did it, now let me apply to medical school. Here are a couple pieces of evidence that suggest that. He writes that, I saw the contrast between these 2 fields, such as different approaches to treating patients. Kind of a generic phrase with no real clear detail there, as well as the commonalities, compassionate patient care, and building trusting relationships with patients. Again, what was different between the 2 approaches? What am I, the reader, supposed to learn? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? I don't really get that sense of detail that I did with the other description of the clinical experiences with the grandpa that dropped the coffee or the young woman with Moya syndrome. Those details really add color to those experiences. Now we'll contrast this with some real shadowing experiences from other medical students across the country. I really enjoy this particular experience because it really shows the gravity of the physician-patient relationship. In this case, the writing talks about a patient with terminal spine cancer, and the physician is asking about the patient's bucket list. And you really get a sense of, whoa, like this is real. This person will die. And now we're having the conversation about what is next for them. I also love the takeaway at the end of this. It makes it feel like the student had really reflected and really thought about his time there. He writes that when confronted with the imminent death of their patients, physicians must be prepared to care for their patients emotionally, even when nothing else can be done medically. All right, so this is a great example of a shadowing experience that was meaningful by way of a specific story. Let's look at another shadowing experience that has a nice breadth of specialties, contexts, patient populations here. So in this description of shadowing, we have a variety of different care contexts. We have hospital inpatient medicine. We have palliative care, which can be inside of a hospital, at a facility, at a home, at a clinic. We have orthopedic surgery, which is in the operating room. Cardiac electrophysiologists, which have their own cardiac suites, cardiologists, which can be outpatient in the community, and private practice, UCSF, obviously a huge academic hospital, and then other community hospitals. So you're seeing a wide spectrum of people from low SES to high SES, from low health literacy to high health literacy. We're seeing surgeons to people who work with end-of-life care, to people who see patients while they're inside the hospital, to patients who see people outside of the hospital. And you can really appreciate how genuine this medical student now at UCLA is about his understanding of medicine. He writes that from heart surgery to a routine checkup, I saw firsthand how transformative an encounter with a physician can be. I appreciate the diversity of medicine and the freedom to hone his passions. And you believe him because you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different experiences over 250 hours and the wide perspective he has on the different things that different doctors do for different patients. Extracurricular number 3, research. All right, now we're heading on to the research data. And no surprise here, a school like UCLA consistently in the 96th, 97th percentile of research experience. What this means to me is that of the 100 students that go to UCLA, 4 of them don't end up doing any type of research or lab. Again, very, very slight numbers. I'd rather be a part of the 96%. And of course, this is consistent across other high tier medical schools. 94, 97, 98, 98% of students at Northwestern, 99% over really the last 4 years for a school like Harvard, meaning that one student who got into Harvard did not do research. Again, I think the data is pretty clear on how important medical school admissions committees see research. Most premeds will wait for an email listserv to send them the perfect opportunity just to fall right into their lap. Or if they're feeling a little bit more proactive, they'll Google undergraduate research portal and look at the list of all the research offerings just like every other premed on their campus. And that's how you end up having a neuroscience major do some random plant biology pineapple photosynthesis research just for no absolute reason. What I recommend instead is to figure out what people, population, or problems that you care about. It can be centered around people like the conditions that Vietnamese immigrants experience, or it can be centered around true diagnoses like autism. Once you've intentionally decided what you're interested in, then I would go about finding the professors that are also interested in the same things on your campus, and then reaching out to them with high quality written emails detailed to their recent publication, sharing your exact reasons for wanting to work with them. This is exactly how our student Abby went from doing random EKGs at a middle school health fair to publishing a paper about monkeypox as a sophomore, much more aligned with her interests in infectious disease and global health. It's highly unlikely that the neuroscience major that's actually really interested in stroke recovery, like myself, would be a very competitive candidate for a pineapple plant biology photosynthesis lab. So ironically, even though you are looking to the portal or the email listservs as the research that is most likely for you, those end up being the least likely because you're not actually well suited and you actually don't enjoy it as much as someone else would. The converse is true. If you are really interested in pediatric stem cell cancers or really interested in autism in certain populations, you are the person that is most likely to get those research opportunities. Those specific projects may not be publicized on an email list or on a website from UCLA, but they're always open for the right student to come and join. It just takes a little bit of proactivity and extremely high quality email from your end to go and get those opportunities. This is a real example, actually an example from the same student who is now at UCLA School of Medicine, who had 7 different shadowing perspectives, 2 of which was a cardiologist and a cardiac electrophysiologist. And so you'll see here that his research is also in cardiology, specifically at the Cardiovascular Research Institute at UCSF. He's using CRISPR-Cas9 to knock out certain sections of a zebrafish genome. And while all that seems like fancy schmancy research goopity gap, the stuff that I really want to highlight include the fact that he's assigned to an independent project where he's responsible for his own enhancer sequences, his own work, his own injections into zebrafish, so that he can be responsible for that work and collaborate with others, present that work to his bosses, and move that project alone without micromanaging oversight. That shows a level of growth and a level of trust that the PI and the professors have with him and with his work. The other thing I want to mention is that this is an intersection of his personal and academic life. This is not a random position that he found on a email listserv or on a research undergraduate forum at his undergraduate college. This is something that he recognized was important to him, and so he went out intentionally and proactively to go get. He personally has a connection with cardiovascular disease because his uncle and father had strokes in the past 2 years. He has also had that perspective of what cardiology looks like from the eyes of a cardiologist in the private practice clinic, and also from the eyes of a cardiac electrophysiologist in the cardiac suite and things of that sort. He also mentioned in that shadowing extracurricular activity writing that he had witnessed some cardiac surgeries as well. So we're really seeing a wide spectrum of cardiology, and it makes sense for someone like this who's interested in the research, interested personally because of his uncle and his father, and seen it as a shadow or a fly on the wall. I wanted to bring those up just because it really closes the loop and gives a medical school a very clear picture on who it is that they are getting when they accept this student. Someone who has had a wide perspective on cardiology and has had impact on several different levels in this field already as an undergrad. So just to be clear, it is less important, all of this cutting edge technology, CRISPR-Cas9, physician scientist, lifelong learner, and really more important that he is connected to this problem of heart disease in so many different ways. It shows that this person is authentic, it shows that this person is dedicated, and it shows that this person is proactive. Number 4, community service. All right, here we go. Our last bit of data here, now focusing on community service or volunteering. You can see that at a school like UCLA, this is becoming increasingly important. More and more students are getting involved with their communities. It wasn't really that low 4 years ago at 82%, but bumped slightly consistently over the last 4 years to 88%. Extremely important. Here, you can see at a school like Northwestern, 4 years ago, it may not have been a part of their priority, but it seems like they've made a determined effort to get more students who are interested in working with their surrounding local and global communities. You see that number bumped to 90 and 88% in the last 2 years. And then at a school like Harvard, again, we're looking at the 80 to 90%. These students are doing it all. They're involved in their community. They're shadowing a ton. They're involved in doing clinical experiences, not paid and paid. And then they're heavily involved with research. So this really closes out and shows that the AAMC's data on what types of students get into what types of medical schools, it's pretty clear that this is an extremely important part of their admissions criteria. When I say community service, most pre-meds often think about a soup kitchen or a homeless shelter, as if those were the only 2 options to serve your community. In line with our recommendations for our research and our clinical experiences, we also want you to find community service opportunities that are in line with the theme of your application and what you truly care about, your passions. For Ben, it meant teaching school-aged children neuroscience. For me, it meant coaching youth basketball at my local park and rec center. And for Steve, it meant washing the feet of the homeless. Whatever it is for you, make sure that you enjoy it, because you're going to be putting up hundreds, if not thousands of hours, really making an impact in your community. If you're doing it just because medical schools will want to see it, you will burn out quickly. And even if you don't, medical schools will be quite disappointed that you spent so much time in an activity that you didn't really care about. job. It comes across as inauthentic and not genuine. Things that are not really what you want in your future doctor. This activity I just really appreciated because it was an interesting community service opportunity that was outside of the purview of just your typical homeless shelter or soup kitchen. This one is great because he had taken a years-long worth geriatrics class and converted some of that stuff that he learned in class over that last year into real things in the world. He was paired with a driver for this Meal on Wheels program, and he partnered with this center, senior center, to help deliver food and groceries to elderly folks who might had trouble getting to the groceries safely on their own. When it comes to understanding the population and getting different perspectives on what it is that really affects their lives, I love how this applicant worked with them in the mobility exercises back at the center perspective, but also delivering meals to them when it was COVID and they couldn't really get out, and also really learning about them for an entire year on campus. Those three different perspectives gives a really three-dimensional understanding of what it is like to be a senior, especially a senior in the context of healthcare and growing older and trying to make sure that you stay on top of your care. So this is an example from my very own application of one of my hobbies that is dearest and closest to my heart, specifically basketball, but also coaching youth basketball. So, I mean, this is an example I've done for 2 summers and I just really enjoy it. You can really see I filmed some of this stuff with my little brother and my mom kind of behind the camera. You can see how engaged I am with the kids when it's a timeout and we're up by 4. I am just really in the element, asking everyone to be involved, really trying to teach these skills that we've been working on in the past couple of weeks of practice. I mean, I just love how animated and just how much I'm seeking the eye contact of every one of my players here. And I'm hoping that you can see that when I talk about it, when I'm engaged with these children, they're the only thing that I really care about at that moment. Having them understand the joy and the love that we all share for this game of basketball. And here's a bonus extracurricular activity that every single pre-med needs: hobbies. Most pre-meds will ignore their hobbies because they believe that medical schools don't think that your interest in tennis or rock climbing is relevant. This couldn't be farther from the truth. Hobbies are a core part of your application because it gives your written documentation, it gives it a 3D feeling. It helps us understand who it is, the person behind that application. While hobbies are hobbies for a reason, if you're really passionate about it, it cannot hurt to also be world class in the thing that you really care about. Winning awards for your photography or winning medals in your weightlifting interests. Excellence in one thing translates to excellence in another, and medical schools recognize excellence whenever they see it, regardless of whether it's in a hospital or in a clinic. Now you know what 4 + 1 bonus 5 types of extracurricular activities every pre-med needs. For 7 of my favorite extracurriculars that turn real pre-meds into doctors graduating from UCLA, UCI, GW, VCU, you'll want to watch this video here. And if you're struggling specifically with clinical experiences, you'll want a deeper dive into what it is that make clinical experiences stand out and how you can get those and avoid the ones that are generic and mediocre. I talk about all of that in this video here. I'll see you there.